Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and I'm going to try to do a new series of videos called viewer, listener, follower, you know, that sort of thing, Q&A, right? It's a Q&A segment. I'm going to try to do it every week, but we'll see where it goes. We'll see if people want to watch it, and see what kind of views it gets, and so on and so forth. But the channel's growing. I got about 8,000 subscribers here. I'm not quitting my day job or anything like that, but I'm getting a lot of questions, and I love it. It's great. But I am finding it a bit of a challenge to keep up with them. Also, you know, sometimes I put an incredible amount of energy into answering these questions, and I think, boy, if one person asks a question like that, there must be other people that are probably asking the same thing. I have a background as a teacher, and I have found in a classroom, whether you got 20 students or 50 students or 300 students, that if you have one student ask a question, it's very possible half the class is got the same question, right? So it's great that people ask questions, and it shows me that people are listening and thinking, and you know, the wheels are turning, sort of thing. That's always wonderful. Here I've selected about, I don't know, about 10. I think I'll try to stick with about 10 a week, because you know, you don't want the video to be too long. But I got about 10 questions that people asked me that I thought were good content. That is to say, they're questions that it's very possible other people have similar questions, and then a good thorough answer would be useful for people. And of course, thank you for all the nice things. People will say nice video and that sort of stuff. That's great. Keep that coming. You know, that's a kind of payment in and of itself, and it's nice to hear. But anyway, let's get started here. I just got them listed on my computer screen. This is my office. This is where the videos get edited. This is where all the magic happens, right? So the first question I got here is from Marie, and it's in reference to the video called Potatoes the Ruth Stout Way, Follow Up and Reveal. It was released back in October 2017, October 10th, I think. And she says, I'm just reviewing your potato videos because this is how I'm planning to plant ours this year. She's talking about planting potatoes using the Ruth Stout method. I'm wondering if there's an absolute need to buy seed potatoes. Can I just pick up a few bags of potatoes from the grocery store and plant those and throw those in? And my answer, I guess I would have two answers to that. Number one, yes you can, and it'll probably work. I can't speak to other parts of the world. I've heard people say that, oh, they spray them with stuff that inhibits growth and stuff like that. I can only speak to my context here. I live in Nova Scotia, Canada, and I don't know quite exactly what the laws are for preparing things for public consumption and sale in grocery stores. But I have never bought potatoes and kept them for a long time and not seen them sprout. Just about every potato I've ever bought, from what I can recall, if I haven't used it right away and you leave it long enough, it starts to get eyes. So I don't know what all potato producers do, but I have found most of them to be viable, right? They're alive when you buy them. If they weren't alive, they'd rot, right? When you buy a potato, it's a root, it's a little bundle of energy, and it's still alive. If it's not alive, it won't keep, as far as I understand it. So yeah, you can plant them and you can stick them in the ground, and very likely they'll grow. Now that being said, there's two reasons why you might not want to do that. Number one is that there's no guarantee that that potato isn't bringing into your soil some sort of soil-borne disease. For instance, potato scab, which is a problem I have everywhere in my garden, because I've done that very thing in the past. You run that risk of introducing that those sort of pathogens into your soil, and that's a problem. So if you use certified seed potato, they're supposed to not bring that into your soil, and that's you know, you don't want to have that. There's a lot of varieties of potato that are more prone to scab than others. So if you've got scab in your soil, it really makes it difficult to get a good yield. Or to put it another way, I mean, potato scab isn't the worst thing in the world, but if you do have it on your potatoes, they don't keep well, and it also makes them, because it compromises the skin on the potato, it makes them vulnerable to things that can bore into it and make them really gross. So that's one reason you wouldn't want to do it. The other reason, which I would say is the reason I don't do that, is because the stores typically sell a pretty narrow range of potato types, and they tend to sell the things that store well, that keep well, that have a particular shape or a particular color, or they're aesthetic, or they're easier to sell, or so on and so forth, right? When you go to a seed provider and you buy certified seed potatoes, typically, you know, I'm not talking about the hardware store, I'm talking about a seed provider. or garden center, a proper dedicated garden center, they're going to have a wide range of varieties to choose from. And I think you'll find that a lot of those are just better tasting than the 2 or 3 varieties that are sold in the store. My favorite potato, Red Norland, I don't think I've ever seen that for sale anywhere in a store, right? But most seed providers provide them, and I don't know why they don't sell them in stores. They keep, maybe they're not as productive. I mean, maybe the ones that are sold in the stores become really big, or maybe you get, more potatoes per plant. But my Red Norlands, I mean, it's March 15th, Ides of March. It's March 15th today as I record this, and my Red Norlands that I harvested last August are in my garage, and they're fine. I mean, they haven't even sprouted eyes yet. They're perfect. They look like I just picked them, right? And they still taste great and everything like that. And I've never seen those for sale. I don't really know why they're a great tasting potato. But anyway, that's the 2 reasons I wouldn't do that. That said, if you're willing or happy to take the risk, it should work out just fine. So I hope that helps you. Another question here is from Jennifer, and it's from a video I did very recently, March 12th, called Getting the Spring Thaw Started Before Spring Starts. She asked, was there a reason you didn't put the spruce on top of the leaves in the fall? Was it because there originally wasn't room until the leaves composted and settled? That's pretty much it. I actually do have one bed where I put leaves down. I put spruce boughs on top, thinking they would probably hold their shape better, and I was right. But most of the beds where I put the leaves down, certainly the ones I was working with in that video, I had like a foot high of leaves on those last fall, and now it's almost down to nothing, which tells me that most of those leaves have actually broken down and become, beneficial for my soil. So there has been work going on in there by the organisms that break things down, right? So that garden has been fertilizing itself, and given that these things are moving around in there, it's also been tilling itself, right? But yeah, the reason I didn't put spruce boughs on those beds is because I had a ton of leaves on there. I didn't, honestly, the amount of leaves I had on there, given how cold it gets here in the winter, I just didn't think it would break down that much. But not only did they, so they would have been mounded up maybe 8-9 inches, like the center of that plastic square thing might have been mounded up 9 inches, like this high, and then when I was there the other day, they'd actually gone below, right? They'd actually gone down. So it's a lot of composting and breaking down of those leaves. Also, I mean, leaves are just, they're paper-like, so they do flatten out. If you have a bunch of crumpled ball of paper and you press it between your hands, it's going to flatten out. So various snowfalls or rains or whatever it's pushing down on that, they will get flattened out. Another reason to use the spruce boughs, because they don't really respond that way. Spruce boughs can get flattened out, but not as readily as leaves, right? Now, I got another video here from Pink Slippers. It's the same video, get the spring thaw started before spring starts. And that was the same date, March 12, 2019. And the question was, hey, thanks, Greg. Couldn't find any hardware stores today that sold rolls of black plastic. I will try the clear instead. Should I remove the snow and straw mulch off first? So that's kind of a twofold question. And I've had lots of people, and I don't know if there's other questions about that are listed here, but lots of people saying they use black as opposed to clear plastic. The inclination to use black plastic is that, black attracts heat. It doesn't really attract heat insofar as, it doesn't reflect it, right? Certain colors reflect heat and certain colors don't. They sort of absorb it. So the anything black outside when the sun's shining and it gets hot, right? But the thing with the black plastic, it doesn't let the light through. If you think about it, most of the material in your garden is dark in color. It's dark brown, it's some sort of brown, beige, or even black, depending on what kind of material you've used in there. So most of the materials that are on your soil are dark anyway. They're going to attract heat to themselves if there's light getting through. But if you have a black plastic over your garden, the plastic's going to heat up when the sun hits it. But the sun isn't getting through and heating up what's underneath the plastic. The only way the things underneath the plastic are going to get any kind of heat is from the heat that's emanating off the plastic. So that black plastic will get hot. It'll heat up the air that's touching it, and that air will heat what's underneath the plastic, right? Which is better than nothing, right? But if you have clear plastic over the garden, the sun will go through the plastic. You've got the radiant heat, right? So the radiant heat will go through the plastic. It'll heat the material that's in the garden bed. And then that material will heat the air that's underneath the plastic, and in turn heat the soil. And so I think, and it's been my experience, I've done these experiments, that you're going to achieve a better thermal mass of heat if it's clear. I mean, there's a reason greenhouses don't have black plastic all over them, right? You want to let the sun through, and it heats the thing that the sun's acting on, right? So that's my take on that. Is to that general question, black or clear, I say use clear, because what's underneath the clear is dark anyway, so it's going to attract heat to itself anyway, but that way you're letting the sun through to act on. If you want to do an experiment, build a little hut and cover it in black garbage bags and sit underneath it on a cold day, and see how warm the hut gets. And then build another hut that's covered in clear plastic, and you're probably sitting there with your shorts on, ready to get warm, like a greenhouse, right? So that's part of the question. The other part of the question was, should I remove the snow and the straw off first? Snow, yes, or you could just put something dark on the snow to sort of heat the snow up a little bit. The snow will reflect light, right? So the snow's white, and so white reflects light off of itself. So, I mean, if you had a lot of snow, I'd try to get the snow off, or put something on it that's darker in color, like ashes or a bit of sand or something like that, just to, you know, draw heat into those little particles that are touching the snow to melt them out. You know, don't break your back. But all the other material, I just leave it under there exactly like I did, because the sun will heat that material up. You know, anything that's not white, the sun's going to be drawn to that, it's going to heat it up, and that stuff is going to build up that thermal mass of heat that's inside the bed and heat everything else and thaw the thing out. I'm going to do some videos really soon showing where my beds are. The beds that aren't covered at all are just frozen solid. And there, I got some I put a heavy mulch over last fall. They're still covered in snow and stuff like that. I'm just leaving them alone for now. We'll check those later on, maybe 1st of April or so on. But I plan, my seeds just arrived yesterday, which is fast. I only ordered them like 3 days ago. But I plan to plant some spinach and lettuce this weekend and get things going. That's the plan anyway. Yeah, leave that stuff in there, because it's gonna, aside from that stuff being some sort of dark in color, when the sun goes down at night and you've got all this heat that you've achieved through the course of the day in that bed, right? That you've got the dome, which sort of insulates it somewhat, but really, I mean, it's just a thin layer of plastic. You've also got all that hay, or in my case leaves, that will insulate the soil. So whatever heat was generated in that mass, it's going to be lost at a slower rate by virtue of having that insulation. Remember, it's a porous insulation, right? It's not like you've got some sort of space-age blanket covering your soil. You've got something that's porous, it lets light through it, it lets air through, right? So the sun has heated up your hay or your mulch, whatever your mulch is. The sun has been heating up your mulch all day. And if you're even lucky, it might even, the hay, you know, that layer where the hay or whatever your mulch is touching the soil will start to warm up and start to compost. And that generates heat too, right? Because there's living things activating in there, and that will create heat, just like any compost pile, right? So if you get enough sun and heat in there, that's going to start happening, and it'll just slow down the heat loss that occurs when the sun goes down and it goes back to being cold and below freezing overnight. I mean, we're going to have nights where it's below freezing for quite some time yet. So that's the answer to that question. Okay, so the next question is from Jean-Paul Dupuis, and it's regarding the video I did building a 4x8 dome. I think the title was Cheap and Easy 4x8 Garden Box. I released that around December 18th, 2018. And it's a video where I just built a 4x8 box and put it together with nails. So Jean-Paul says, I unilaterally prefer screws over nails. With a cordless drill, they go in just as fast, are easier to control, and require much less strength and dexterity to use. It's very easy to drive a screw a 1/4 inch deep and freely adjust the angle and drive it home to exactly where you want it. In my experience, he says, the narrow shank of the screw is much less likely to split timbers than nails. If you make a mistake, you can back them out Screws are slightly more expensive, but generally they're more accessible to novice and will produce better results. Generally speaking, I agree with everything you're saying. So I'll tell you why I use nails in that video. There's two basic reasons. Number one, I try to make my videos from the point of the view of the person who has no gear and no tools. So hammers are cheaper than drills, especially like if you're going to buy a half-decent cordless drill. You can get a hammer at a dollar store that works perfectly fine for like $3, right? And nails are cheaper than screws. So that's kind of where I was coming from. Also, I've got fairly good experience driving 3.5-inch nails, so I can actually slap a box together faster personally with nails. And I find if the wood's heavy enough, it won't split, especially if you have the nail back a little bit from the end. If you put it too close to the end, it will. Also, as you understand wood, you can sort of read a board by where you should place the nail. Certain places, if there's a knot or whatever, might be a little bit more likely to split. That's one reason. The other reason is if you've ever worked in the construction business, and I basically put myself in university in that sort of general area, and you always have guys on a crew that don't have a lot of experience. You've got skilled carpenters, other skilled tradespeople, but often there's people like on the crew called laborers, and they're just brought in because they're reasonably strong and they'll do what they're told. And sometimes you get one of those guys, you give them a drill and say, hey, drill in these decking screws or whatever. And I have noticed, and also just, various people helping me, like relatives and so on and so forth, that don't have a lot of experience using that sort of gear and driving long screws, is that when you give someone like that a drill and you get them to try to, drive home a 3-inch screw, they don't push hard enough to get the bit in the head of the screw, and it goes, it makes that awful sound, that, and you're just wrecking the screw and simultaneously wrecking the bit. Especially if you're trying to hold two boards together and you have to do that all with one hand, you just slip off, right? So in a certain sense, it is easier to use nails than a drill. It depends on what you're doing, but when you're driving a longer screw, there's a particular way to hold the drill and harness and focus your power and your weight into that head. And if you don't know how to do that, it can be very frustrating, and you can even injure yourself. I personally, even though I've got experience, sometimes you've had a few too many beers when you're doing work like that, or you're being impatient, or you're not being safe. I have driven a number 2 Robert's head right through my thumb, like through the sort of the meat part, because you're holding, like, let's say you're holding 2 boards together and you got the screw and you're pushing really hard and it slips off the head. And I've literally driven, and it's spinning, right? So even though it's not sharp because it's spinning and you're pushing hard, I've driven that right through the side of my thumb, and I got some incredible injuries that way. So you have to be careful using a drill when you're applying a lot of force to it. It's not necessarily as easy as one might think. I've seen novices use drills, and they usually just wreck the bit and they wreck the screw. And it takes a little while, and it's worth learning how to do. And most of the boxes in my garden, I did use a drill and screws to put together. It really depends on the mood I'm in, really. But sometimes, depending on how I've got things set up, I can actually slap them together better with nails. But anyway, use whatever you want. And I wasn't doing the video from the point of you have to use nails, it's the only way. Use whatever you're comfortable with. And everything Jean-Paul is saying is correct in terms of the great thing about screws is you can back them out and put them back in, and that sort of thing. Okay, the next question is from Stella, and it was with regard to the podcast that I put up called the most recent podcast. Put it up last weekend called Hybrids versus Heirlooms, and she says, hey, that was worth knowing. Thanks a lot for clarifying that. I always wondered. Some of the so-called gurus seem to shroud everything in mystery, so you're left with the certain knowledge that you must be the world's dumbest person for your inability to grasp what they're saying. Yeah, that's kind of why I do this thing. I really have no time for mystics, especially in this area, right? I mean, the point is to help people, not confuse them with a bunch of highfalutin language and making it seem more difficult than it really is. That's what I'm trying to do, and thank you for mentioning that. That's what I try to do here. I try to make things seem simpler to people and sort of demystify a lot of the talk around permaculture, organic gardening, all that sort of stuff. I think people can tend to get a little bit, or go a little bit overboard on how they talk about the approach. It's a very, I couldn't think of a more intuitive approach. You know, go outside, look at a system that no one's managing where things are growing, and just copy that, and you just build everything on that. Use your experience, trial and error, and that sort of stuff. So anyway, thanks for that comment. Next one is from Carol Parrish. It was from the video I did very recently, enhancing a cold frame. I put some mylar at the back to, you know, at the north end, right? It's the south this way, and it bounces off the mylar. It's like shiny plastic stuff, and it goes down the soil. So she says, have you thought about putting fresh, hot horse manure around the outside of the bed? It would increase the heat if you put enough. Yeah, I've thought about that, but it's easier said than done. And also the place, at this time of year, the place I typically get my manure from, and things are kind of frozen up a little bit. And then also, it would be temporary. I'd have I got a cold frame that's 2 feet by 6 feet. To surround that with manure, I'd have to remove that manure later. All that area where I don't want things growing in my garden, that would be my walking path. To cover my walking path with manure would probably mean that walking path, which is just normally wood chips, would have 1,000 seeds in it. And that doesn't really interest me. But it is a good idea, and it would, you know, depending on your situation. I mean, I sort of want things to be a certain way and look a certain way, so that would just really not work for me. The result would be weeds growing where I don't want them to grow at all, although it would, as she implies, impart a lot of heat to the inside. If you had enough of it, right, you'd have to you'd have to have it maybe a foot wide all the way around to actually insulate it and generate heat. But a really simple thing to do, I didn't do this last fall, but maybe I'll do it this fall, is to remove maybe the top 4 inches of soil and put 4 inches of pretty fresh horse manure underneath, and then put the soil back. Now you've got something that's hot, that's working, that's full of energy, right? And put that in like in the fall to overwinter like that. It'll replenish your soil, it'll break down. I've found if you bury horse manure about 4 inches deep, the weed seeds don't germinate. Right, so it's a really easy way. People always say, "Oh, horse manure is full of weeds. Don't use it." If you put it under about 4 inches of soil, it really doesn't seem to generate that many weeds, in my experience. Using the horse manure I have access to, and whatever kind of weed seeds are in that, which is primarily grass, timothy, and alfalfa and stuff like that. Another question here from Marcia Marsberger. Marcia. She says, the same video, reference to the same video, enhancing a cold frame. She says, use bottles painted black, fill with water. They will heat up and put off heat throughout the night. That's an excellent idea. I mean, what she's speaking to is put something in there that's going to increase the thermal mass inside the cold frame. I have no such bottles at my disposal, but I'll keep an eye out. I'll try to build up. You know, everything I have in my garden, a lot of it is stuff I just found that people threw away. So I'll definitely try to build up some sort of stockpile of that. I guess I could paint old pop bottles black, but we don't drink pop here. We just drink water out of the tap. So anyway, it's a very good idea. If you've got a black bottle and it's full of water, that water will heat up, and then when the sun goes down, there's still heat there. It's a very good idea. And I've heard of that before, and it's a very good idea. Jonathan Harris, same video, enhancing a cold frame, says, how about bringing up the level of soil a bit and grading it so it faces south? It may help warm up the soil and give more light to your plants. That way you wouldn't have to redo the box. That's true, but then by bringing the soil up higher, it wouldn't retain water as well. Also, by bringing it up higher, it wouldn't get quite as warm in the winter because it would be above grade. So the soil that's at grade, it's got the surrounding area as kind of like an insulator, right? When it's above that, it's actually exposed in a sense. You think of any sort of box that's above ground, it's basically in the air. So there's no insulation around that other than the wood that's building the box is made of. I found that where I am, that anything that's elevated freezes faster and takes longer it usually thaws out. It just freezes faster and harder. All my raised beds tend to be much more frozen than the ones that are at grade. That's what I've noticed. And there's lots of people that say, oh, raised beds thaw out quickly. I would say they thaw out quickly if they're extremely well drained. So I would say raised beds thaw out quickly if there's no water in them. because if there's no water in it, it really doesn't freeze that much because there's nothing to freeze, right? But if you've got a kind of soil that holds a lot of moisture, especially if you're somewhere like I live, where it tends to rain sometimes in the winter, that raised bed just becomes a block of ice. It's got no insulation on the outer edge, right? A bed that's at grade, the insulation is the adjacent soil, right? So anyway, this is something people are always asking me about, and I mean, every time I do a video, oh, you should have a raised bed, maybe there's different contexts where it works differently. I've never found a raised bed where I am to thaw faster than a bed at grade. I always find the beds at grade, and they don't freeze as bad, and they thaw, and that's probably why they thaw quicker, especially if they're covered in a mulch. What's this other one here? Last question. Katie Ann at Ozark Hollow Homestead. She says, and this is with reference to the video I put up. It was kind of like a PowerPoint presentation called Why I Don't Bother with Transplants. She says, thanks for all you do. I love your channel and the realistic garden advice without all the frills of blogging about your personal life, like so many gardening and homesteading channels do. Here in the Missouri Ozarks, I do mostly winter sowing in jugs. I find that plants are much hardier when grown that way or direct seeded. I agree, that's why I direct seed. The video was about why I don't start transplants inside my house. Everything I have is direct seeded out in my garden, despite having a short growing season here and not less than ideal growing conditions. I found with the plastic domes and little things you can do to create microclimates in the garden, you can get things started earlier, maybe 3 weeks or a month earlier, depends on the plant. And that's how you solve that equation. And when they're direct seeded like that, they grow a lot faster. But I did want to speak to I mean, I guess it's a bit of a plug for me, but blogging about your personal life like so many gardening and homesteading channels do. I wanted to speak to that because that is something that turns me off when I watch other people's channels. It's a very natural thing to do as a human being, where people start watching everything you do and you start thinking, hey, I can do anything. People just want to see me, right? And that's a flaw I think a lot of YouTubers fall into. Even this year, I started doing some videos out in the woods, doing stuff I like to do out in the woods, and I was putting that up on my channel. And at some point I just said, you know what, I'm not doing that anymore. That's why, for those of you that are interested in that content, maybe I'll make another channel at some point in time. But I noticed that they weren't getting as many views as the other ones, and I just realized that I was starting to make this channel about me instead of making about gardening. The whole point of this channel is to help people, with their gardens, right? My general philosophy for this channel is I'm giving myself advice I'm giving the advice I would have liked to have had 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago when I was starting out. That's who I'm speaking to, a less experienced version of myself, a person who's trying to grow as much of their own food on the land they've got access to, using as little time and money and inputs as possible, trying to do it in a way that's ecologically responsible, sustainable, all that sort of stuff. And any one of these channels where, I don't know why people do this sort of thing, but you get the channel where they're driving somewhere and like the whole video is just the guy talking while he's driving in his truck. Dude, I don't want to watch you in your truck while you're driving. It's not why, if you have a channel that you'll find some guy who shows you how to fix a chainsaw and you think, wow, what a great guy, he's so practical. And then you follow the guy for a while and next thing you know, he's just like driving in his truck talking about his life. It's like, I'm not following you. I was interested in your channel because you're good at fixing chainsaws. I'm not interested in your political views or your personal life or how you raise your children or anything like that, right? So I made a little mistake this year where I was, maybe people just are interested in anything I do. And so I was like going out in the woods and making videos about that and so on and so forth. This is a gardening channel. People tune in to watch me talk about gardening and help them have good gardens. So I'm going to make a promise to viewers. I'm going to keep it focused on that. If I'm out in the woods, it's going to have something to do with the garden, right? And I'm going to keep it focused on that. If I want to have a video on being out in the woods or fishing or some of the things I enjoy, I'll make a separate channel and people that are into that can watch that channel. But this channel is not about me. It's about gardening. So thank you for that compliment and for your comment. And it's good that it's just nice to hear that that's coming through, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to not be that guy that makes the channel about himself, or that woman that makes the channel about herself. I'm trying to be just a person with a channel that's helping people garden. So that does it for this week. I hope you found this interesting. Give me your comments and let me know what you think about this new segment, or whatever, new series of Q&As. I hope that helped you, and I hope that answered your question. I hope other people that had similar questions, I hope that helped you. If you enjoyed that, please like, share, subscribe. If you aren't getting an indication from YouTube whenever I make about 2 videos a week, give or take. And if you haven't clicked the bell, you click the subscribe thing, but you also got to click the bell thing, or you won't get any indication from YouTube that I've dropped a new video. So if you want to know whenever I've done something new, click the bell, and YouTube should let you know. I subscribe to a number of channels, but the only ones that I get any sort of indication that a new video has come out is the ones I've clicked the bell for. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Cheers.